Sailing the high seas is one of humanity's greatest accomplishments. Cargo ships transport up to 3 million containers in their lives. High-tech terminals ensure a precise transshipping process.
Everything we do out here when we are navigating on the seas, we need to do well in advance. We need to have a plan.
Every year, new, even bigger cargo ships are built, and special vessels cut through even the thickest pack ice. Entire oil rigs traverse the oceans towed by extremely powerful tugboats. The latest navigational systems guide them safely across the waters.
Nowadays, technology it means that you always have a very accurate position, but it can always happen that something is wrong with it.
Giant cruise ships, like floating cities, carry millions of passengers. Ships move the world. But they are also gargantuan polluters. Pioneers want to change that with revolutionary, environmentally friendly technology for the future. In spite of all that progress, seamen still wrestle with the forces of nature until the life of a ship eventually comes to its end and people take it apart again, piece by piece.
I work here because this is the only work I know. I started here when I was only a kid, and today I'm an engineer.
And new giants of the seas are born again. Today, container ships transport about 90% of all global trade. Almost 2 billion pieces of goods travel the seas in containers every year. In the port of Hamburg alone, about 170,000 containers are loaded and unloaded every week. Stacked on top of each other, they would reach the ISS space station. And that's more than 400 kilometers above the Earth. And even a little bit beyond that. But who builds all these ships that carry these goods? The order books of the shipyards where these giants are built are not as well filled as they used to be just a few years ago. That puts more pressure on prices. Globally, many shipyards have had to shut down. About 350 remain in business. The majority in Asia, since wages there are lower than in Europe and governments pay subsidies, as in the case here in China near Shanghai. 7 o'clock in the morning, the workday starts for 3,500 people. They build so-called bulk carriers for a German shipping company. The foundation of any ship is steel. First, workers cut steel plates that are up to 10 centimeters thick using laser cutters. Then they reassemble them and take the 150,000 individual parts to form the components of the ship, the interior and the hull. After that, these pieces, like in a giant jigsaw puzzle, are joined together into sections. Li Yuyan Lin is a crane operator. Her job is to place every finished component in its proper spot. The pieces can weigh up to 800 tons. Using tact and a light touch, she hoists these steel elements into the nearly 300-meter-long and 30-meter-wide colossus.
You need laser-sharp focus. I concentrate only on the task at hand. And it takes courage and a lot of patience. And of course, you cannot fiddle with your smartphone when on the job.
The launching of the Kendra Oldendorf is drawing nearer. This magical moment when a cargo ship sails off into the sea for her maiden voyage. And of course, when putting together such a ship, every welding seam must be absolutely flawless and without any gaps. A big responsibility for welders like Gu Haibin.
As a kid, I always dreamed of traveling the oceans, but it never happened. But I think it's great for me to be building ships here in China that can carry my dream out into the world. That makes me proud.
The moment has finally arrived. The cargo ship glides into the water for the first time, propelled only by its own weight. The fact that this colossal construction of 14,100 tons of steel is able to float at all is due to its special shape. A block of steel would just sink. You have to change its volume until its buoyancy is higher than its own weight. A ship weighing 100 tons floats when it displaces more than 100 tons of water. This is where the Archimedes principle applies. Since the cargo of the ship pushes it even deeper into the water, the maximum carrying capacity is of crucial importance. The Kendra Oldendorf has a draft of 14 meters. The maximum of other giants of the seas is 23 meters. The Kendra Oldendorf is designed to carry bulk goods, raw materials such as ores, steel and grain. Propulsion is provided by a new 8,000 horsepower engine that runs on heavy fuel oil, the cheapest fossil energy there is, but also the absolutely worst for the environment. So-called scrubbers pull the sulfur oxides from the exhaust fumes, but often these filters are only switched on near the coast. At high sea, these ships still run on heavy oil. Today, however, the allowed emission levels have also been substantially reduced on the high seas. After 10 months of construction, almost everything is finished, except for one final and crucial step.
So make the ship ready, we will go for sea trial to the ocean. When the sea trial completed, we deliver the ship.
During its service life, the ship will transport millions of tons around the globe on the main arteries of international shipping that connect the equatorial corridor of North America with the increasingly important Asian-Pacific region, which in turn is connected with Europe. Globally, more than 90,000 container ships, tankers, tugboats, ferries and cruise ships are on the world's ocean at any given moment. And the logistics backing all this up are becoming more and more complex. Ever since globalization started, ports have been transforming into huge high-tech transshipping centers, like here in Rotterdam, Europe's largest and most important port. The first port of the city was built in the 14th century. It was near the city center in those days, but they ran out of space about 100 years ago. Today, the latest port section is located 40 kilometers outside the city. It's home to the most modern container terminal in the world. Made for ships like the Moscow Maersk, with 18,000 containers on board, enough to cover more than 130 football fields.
Port 20.
After 2 weeks on the high seas, Captain Jens Christian Kelletsko and his crew arrive at their destination on time. And the clock is running. Within 24 hours, almost 4,000 containers need to be unloaded. Efficiency is immensely important, especially in the container business, because about 90% of all globally traded goods move around the globe in this fashion. On board the container ship, First Officer Jeffrey Julius Braganza is monitoring the ship's balance while the unloading is going on.
We take seawater from outside into the tanks of our ship. So if they load too much of cargo on one side of the ship, we can balance it with seawater from the sea.
While the crew and sensors analyze the balance situation of the cargo, cameras on land monitor the entire loading and unloading process. You will find almost no people here. Nearly everything is remote controlled. The crane operators sit far away from the docks, at the command center. The port cranes weigh 1,700 tons and are the biggest in the world. The crane operators switch between them by pushing a button.
Tam, can you read me?
Yes, we're here.
We're almost done with the gondolas.
Okay, the cargo's on its way to you.
Every year, about 2.7 million containers can be transshipped here in Rotterdam. Automation makes it possible. Remote control transporters, the so-called automated guided vehicles, take every container to its next destination. No drivers from ship to shore and back. The vehicle with battery charge lasts for 8 hours, and even the recharging process is completely automated, which means they are operational for 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, without a single human being involved. For Terminal Director Jan Boyce, automation is the only way. Competition between ports is becoming increasingly fierce.
The big advantage is, of course, is when it is robotized, it doesn't make an error like you have with when there's human intervention involved. Also, as a terminal, you also compete with surrounding terminals. So that's a major item that we can actually reduce our cost. In the end, what we would like to achieve is that we, as a minimum, keep our cost flat.
Further optimization is planned to increase the terminal's efficiency even further. The owners hope this will offset the annual rate of inflation. The business is run in a climate-neutral manner. 100% of electricity used here is generated from renewable energy. In the meantime, the Moscow Maersk has almost been completely loaded. Time for the first officer to recheck the load. Every container needs to be secured so it can withstand waves several meters high in choppy weather. Because no matter how big such a ship is, there are forces that can render it powerless. On board, there's a wise saying that still holds true. At sea, you're in God's hands.
To navigate a big ship like this is a challenge in itself. It takes time to speed up, it takes time to slow down, it takes maneuvering space because it is so big. So everything we do out here when we are navigating on the seas, we need to do well in advance. We need to have a plan.
Especially when you're in a tight spot, like in the numerous man-made sea lanes. The most important among them, the Suez Canal. Every year, about 500 million tons of cargo is carried from the Far East to Europe by ship. The Suez Canal is their shortcut. This bottleneck connects the Indian Ocean with the European Mediterranean and shortens the sea voyage between Asia and Europe by at least a week. The ocean giants don't have to go through any locks, since the water levels of the Mediterranean and the Red Sea are almost the same. While in the past, ships had to sail around the entire landmass of Africa, today they take the 163-kilometer route through the Suez Canal, straight through Egypt. Passing the canal is possible only once a day and only in a convoy, and with plenty of distance between ships. Since its expansion in 2015, the canal is navigable in both directions along extensive stretches of the route. In the port of Ismailia, the Suez Canal Authority monitors every individual ship on its way through the bottleneck. Only perfectly coordinated shipping allows them to pilot about 50 ships daily through the canal in both directions. That's about 14% of global merchandise on board these ships. The shipping companies pay by weight, on average $250,000 per passage. Captain Ahmed Khalil runs the department. He's responsible for a lot of money.
The ships passing through the Suez Canal don't pay a single fixed price. The fare is set according to each ship and is determined according to the type of ship, its load, whether it's loaded or not, its draft. Not all ships cost the same.
Ship pilots are mandatory in the Suez Canal. 2 specially trained experts per vessel ensure that the ships arrive at their destination without any damage. It doesn't matter if it's a cruise, battle or container ship. Since 1888, the Convention of Constantinople has stipulated that the Suez Canal must be open to all ships from all nations at the same conditions. Accidents in the Suez Canal are rare, but if they do happen, the consequences are dire.
If something goes wrong with the engine here, you wouldn't have enough pressure on the rudders. You can't steer anymore. And if you can't steer anymore, then you won't have much space here. Then we will move in the direction the wind tells us to go. So what happens next? The ship turns into the wind and we drift crossways into the canal. And then we have a problem.
In 2004, a tanker had a propulsion issue and got stuck crossways in the canal. The shipping lane was blocked for days. The result? Millions of dollars of loss for the canal authorities and the shipping companies. How traveling on the high seas has developed here in the Mediterranean can be demonstrated by taking a look at the shipwrecks found at the bottom of the sea. Neanderthals ventured out into the open sea in dugouts about 170,000 years ago. That's what tool finds suggest. Then, about 3,500 BC, the Egyptians invented the sail for ships, and with its help, traveled around the eastern region of the Mediterranean. The Phoenicians then succeeded in sailing far beyond the Mediterranean around 1000 BC. At the end of the 6th century before Christ, they traveled as far as the Tin Islands off the coast of Great Britain. Around 800 AD, the Vikings learned how to use the sun's position in the sky and created a sun compass for celestial navigation. This is how the Vikings managed to cross the Atlantic and reach Newfoundland off the coast of North America by 1000 AD. Then, the 15th century saw the next revolution in seafaring. Spaniards and Portuguese sailed on the trade wind, navigating along the latitudes. This is how Vasco da Gama found the sea route to India. In the 18th century, the exact measurement of time allowed sailors to determine longitudes. And in 1819, they crossed the Atlantic on the first steamer, the Savannah. And then, in the 1960s, the first container ship went to sea, the beginning of globalized trade. Today, specialty ships like this tugboat tow incredible loads across the seas and still have navigational technology on board that dates back hundreds of years. Because what happens if electronic navigation fails? This is an emergency which Captain Kiesbronk trains for with his cadets.
Nowadays, technology it means that you always have a very accurate position, but it can always happen that something is wrong with it. And then we need to rely on an old system like the sailors used to do in the old days.
To this day, the captain and the crew rely on the sextant in an emergency. It revolutionized the determination of positions on the high seas at the beginning of the 18th century and made it possible for legends like James Cook to go on spectacular exploratory travels. Its most important elements, the graduated arc, several mirrors and a telescope. Cadets use the sextant to measure the angle between the horizon and celestial bodies. Simultaneously, they note down the exact time at which they took the measurement, and then compute the difference between the observed and the calculated position of the star. This is how they can determine their current position. The cadets have to repeat this entire procedure several times in a row. If there is cloud cover, a sextant is of no use. The only thing they can do then is to continue on their voyage by compass and measure again with the sextant at the next opportunity. Unpredictable weather and giant waves remain the biggest dangers in maritime shipping. Every year, many containers are lost on the world's oceans. Like in 2011, The cargo ship Rena ran aground off the coast of New Zealand. It not only lost oil from its tanks, but also several hundred containers. Modern ships rarely ever capsize and sink. But how can it happen at all? There are two counteracting forces working on a ship: the buoyancy of the water and the weight of the ship. Both forces converge on a single point. In container ships, cruise ships or ferries, the center of gravity normally sits above the center of buoyancy. That makes a ship dimensionally stable. If, on account of the load, the center of gravity is too high above the center of buoyancy, things become dangerous. Should the ship tilt due to a powerful wave, there is a point where it can't upright itself again and capsizes. Even today, hurricanes that suddenly change directions can be the doom of any ship. Running aground is often the result of human error, as was the case in 2012 when the Costa Concordia disaster ended the life of 32 people. And then there are monster waves, which can be up to 30 meters high. Long considered a myth, the proof was filmed from an oil drilling rig in the North Sea at the end of the 90s. In 2001, the luxury liner Bremen encountered a 35-meter wave. The ship was dead in the water, unable to maneuver for 30 minutes before the crew managed to activate the auxiliary diesel engine. A very close call. But time and again, ships vanish without a trace. Experts assume that monster waves are to blame. The so-called Northwest Passage spelled the end for many sailors. They often have to sail long routes to reach ice-free water. The Northwest Passage through the Arctic Sea between Canada and Greenland would be a shortcut, but it's iced over. Now, in times of global warming, the ice is melting, and it has become more common for the passage to be sailable in the summer months. To keep the icy routes free for passage, that is the mission of special ships. Just like here, in the Gulf of Bothnia, the northern extension of the Baltic Sea between Sweden and Finland, where in harsh winters, the ice masses can stack up to 1 meter even at sea. That's when icebreakers, such as the Polaris, come into play. It comes to rescue when other ships get stuck in the ice and cannot move ahead under their own power. This special ship patrols the northern Baltic Sea region throughout the entire year. The crew is part of the Finnish traffic department and operates as a kind of emergency rescue service for ships. The channels are regularly checked and kept open by the Polaris. It can break through ice sheets up to 1.5 meters thickness, but your naked eye won't be able to tell you how thick the ice is.
Our most important piece of equipment is our radar. The radar image shows you the shape of the ice. If we're heading towards packed ice, icebergs or ice walls, this helps us to go round them. Plus, we also have an electronic sea chart.
The radar emits electromagnetic waves at a 360-degree angle. With the help of their echoes, the crew determines position, distance and composition of the ice, not unlike the echo navigation of bats. The Polaris is called to a mission. A ship, the Alaska Borg, is stuck in the vastness of the ice and is in need of assistance. Any kind of delay in cargo shipping costs time and money. But there's also another more important reason. The ice is dangerous.
When ice sheets move and push against the ship, this high pressure can seriously damage the ship.
The ice is always moving. It's unpredictable and can suddenly shoot up along the hull of a ship. it can do serious damage, even to a modern steel ship, and even sink it. The Alaska Borg is en route from Finland to Asia. Her cargo, turbines, generators, and 30,000 tons of steel alloy.
Turn now and reduce power from the rear.
The icebreaker has to free the cargo ship. The crew of the Polaris tries to crack up the surrounding ice sheets.
Alaska Borg Polaris.
Alaska Borg.
Half speed ahead, right now, please.
Okay.
They succeed. The team of the icebreaker can free up the Alaska Borg and escorts the ship all the way to its destination. This service is already included in the waterway fee shipping companies must pay to berth in Finnish ports. The Polaris accompanies the cargo ship to the coastal city of Tornio in the north of the Gulf of Bothnia. Without the powerful engines of the icebreaker, an almost impossible task. Sailing in a convoy requires the men at the helm to have a very sensitive touch, because the Alaska Borg needs to follow the Polaris as closely as possible, but without bumping into it. Polaris is protected rather well against such collisions, thanks to reinforcements of the stern. The stopping distance of ships like the Alaska Borg is 2 kilometers. Thus, rear-end collisions are not rare in these maneuvers. Mission accomplished. The Polaris is expected to run missions for another 2 decades, helping thousands more ships navigate through the ice. As ships go, the Polaris is considered exotic, a specialty vessel that often has to take on rather extraordinary jobs. They roam the 7 seas. Transporting this gigantic gas drilling platform, for example. All this is possible thanks to the most powerful semi-submersible ship in the world. To begin with, its loading area lies 16 meters below the waterline. As soon as the tug has put the platform into position, the semi-submersible pumps the ballast water out of its tanks and lifts itself up together with its huge load. The biggest transport ship of this kind in the world can lift up to 117,000 tons. Or to put it another way, theoretically, you could stack up 422 Airbus A380s on its loading area. And you would end up at almost 11,000 meters above ground, the cruising altitude of commercial airliners. But for some cargo, even this amount of power won't do. Then it's time to call in the ALP Striker, the most powerful high-sea tug in the world. The mission: to take this oil rig to the other end of the world. The West Bolster, one of the biggest and most modern oil drilling rigs worldwide. It measures 123 meters long, 78 meters wide, and when empty, weighs 1,000 tons. It is still anchored off the coast of Asia. Or to be more precise, at Busan in South Korea. It is set to sail across the Indian Ocean, around the Cape of Good Hope, with a short stopover in Walvis Bay in Namibia, all the way to its temporary new home, the Canary Islands. A transport job of the highest order. At the helm, the captain of the ALP Striker, Kees Pronk.
Heading 234. I've heard the costs of the drilling rig. It's quite high, but yeah, you don't think that much about it. because if you start thinking about that, it can get quite nervous.
The cargo that the ALP Striker is tugging through the ocean is worth €500 million. The first step in the transport process, to hitch up the 31,000 tons of freight, secured with steel cables, chains and solid bolts. There is one thing that absolutely cannot happen, that the tow lines snap at high sea. It's mainly these steel chains, weighing 4 tons each, that the drilling rig is attached to during the entire transport. The team hooks up one of each onto the pontoons of the West Bolster and connects them with the main tow line of the ALP Striker. This 3-point connection ensures sufficient stability. After 6 hours of preparation, the ALP Striker sails off with its heavy load. At a speed of 5 knots, around 10 kilometers per hour. Such transports across the world's oceans are extremely rare and, of course, a challenge for the crew. On the high seas, the distance between the ALP Striker and its load is almost 2 kilometers. In the past, the crew had to send off a manned dinghy for every check, a pretty risky task in rough seas. These days, a drone does the job and checks if the tow lines are in danger of coming loose. However, a collision with another ship or running aground will be an even worse scenario. To prevent exactly that from happening, a modern ship like the ALP Striker has special electronic assistance available, in particular the Electronic Chart Display and Information System, ECDIS for short. Its heart is the electronic sea charts that take all relevant data into account, even the registry of beacons on the world's oceans.
We can monitor continuously. We can see water depths, the speed, where we are on the chart. We can make also our route over there, so we can just follow a route that we know where we have to sail to.
It also includes radar and sonar data. In order to guarantee a maximum of safety at high sea, 2 independent systems run in parallel on each ship. On its way to Norway, the destination of the drilling rig, the ALP Striker will encounter numerous other ships. The 7 seas are a busy place. About 90,000 ships sail the oceans. Tankers, bulk cargo and container ships, ferries or cruise ships. Every year, just short of 1,500 new ships are launched globally, far more than are scrapped. These ocean giants reach on average the age of 29 before they sail into their final port, like this ship graveyard in Pakistan. Near the Pakistani coastal city of Gadani, around 130 scrapyards wait for old, decommissioned ocean giants. Every year, more than 800 big ships are scrapped worldwide. This is a huge mountain of scrap ships. If you do the maths, this amounts to about 60,400 ships since the 60s, enough to fill the city limits of Berlin. It's the end of the road for this ship too, the Oceana, an oil tanker from South Korea. For 23 years, this ship carried hundreds of thousands of tons of crude oil across the world's oceans. Now, it's time for retirement. Foreman and engineer Ali bears the responsibility for cutting the 10,000-ton ship into pieces. This is about 3 months' work for approximately 50 people.
First, we cut a large opening into the bow. This gives us the space to roll big tools, cranes or vehicles into the ship.
Today, the tip of the bow is supposed to come off and give access to the ship's hull. "65% of all ships to be scrapped end up in South Asia. The purchase price is based on the empty weight. In the case of the Oceana, this amounts to €365 per ton, a price tag of €3.6 million for this decommissioned tanker. But the scrapping is a dirty business in many respects. For years, Pakistan was among the 10 countries with the toughest work conditions worldwide. In the meantime, basic safety rules have been introduced into the shipyards, on warning signs at least. Still, the wrecks are dangerous. Welders are often exposed to toxic fumes or asbestos dust. Fatal accidents are a regular occurrence through gas explosions or from falling parts. Foreman Ali is paid about €280 per month. That's €100 more than the average wage in his country.
I work here because this is the only work I know. I started when I was only a kid, and today I've worked my way up to engineer. I'm paid well and have good health care. This is a good profession, and so far, nothing bad has happened to me.
Scrapping is a lucrative business, especially for the shipyard operators. The painstaking work of dismantling the ships allows them to sell even the smallest parts. However, the thing that sells best is steel, and the ocean giants are made of 95% steel. And this steel gets recycled back into Pakistan's national steel industry in large parts. Every day, trucks transport more than 200 tons of material out of the shipyard to the nearest city for processing. Next up, the bow of the Oceana. The incoming tide has Foreman Ali and his workers in a hurry. If the tide is too high, the men can't use their flame cutters or pull the separated pieces out of the water. The job needs to be done inside 30 minutes. Success. Winches hoist the nose of this ocean giant onto the beach. Foreman Ali is pleased with the result.
I hope the industry is doing well, because then we have work. If business in the industry is slow, then that is bad for us too. In any case, we do our best to keep this industry moving forward.
The so-called Hong Kong Convention is supposed to make scrapping of ships more environmentally friendly and improve work conditions. But it is not binding yet. Too few countries have ratified the convention. The scrapping business is still thriving. And here is another reason why. The giants of the sea are under criticism. Currently, the world's fleet uses up to 370 million tons of fuel per year. Many of the gigantic ships burn heavy fuel oil on the high seas. It's only in designated zones where they must switch to ship's diesel, near ports, for example. Emission standards are becoming stricter at sea, but critics demand stopping the use of heavy fuel oil completely. A transition to natural energies is being called for, like on this ferry. A 24-meter high cylinder supports the ferry's propulsion system. It's a kind of rotating sail that helps cut down the CO2 emissions dramatically. The idea is not exactly brand new. The so-called Flettner rotor was used for the first time in 1924. The verdict then, however, was too much effort and too little efficiency. In the meantime, however, in times of climate change, the invention has seen a comeback. A 20% reduction in CO2 emissions is possible, thanks to the so-called Magnus effect. As soon as the onboard sensors register enough wind, a motor starts to rotate the cylinder. This rotation accelerates the airflow on the one side into the direction of the rotation, while it slows down the airflow on the other side. This results in an air pressure drop, or to put it differently, lift is generated that drives the ship forward. Tuomas Riski has set himself the goal to equip up to 20,000 ships with this technology in the next few years.
We are extremely proud of the result. With external analysis partners, we have proven that we are saving more than 250 tons of fuel per year.
The more cylinders, the more efficient the system. The rotor sail can be installed on virtually any ship that offers enough space on deck. Many shipping companies, however, shy away from the additional cost. But in spite of that, there are already new ships being built that use this technology. The power of the wind, a propulsion used for thousands of years to cross the oceans, is being rediscovered. This future of propulsion in sea shipping is playing out on a catamaran like no other on the planet. The Energy Observer. Fitted with solar panels, wind rotors, and a fuel cell. Here, the ship is anchored off the coast of Norway. A 6-year research trip took the crew of the catamaran around the entire world. Engineer Hugo Devedeux is checking, as he does every day, the heart of the ship, the hydrogen cell.
What we do is we produce our own hydrogen from water from the sea that we desalt and demineralize. We have an electrolyzer, so something that breaks the H2O molecule in H2 and O2. So the O2, we let it go at the vent, so we produce O2, and we keep the H2, so the hydrogen. We compress it and we store it into the big tanks you see outside.
The 8 hydrogen tanks supply the ship with 2 megawatt-hours of energy, enough to run the catamaran for 8 hours only on hydrogen. But there is rarely a need for this, because the ship uses additional wind energy to charge its batteries and to supply both their electric motors.
It's starting to be advantageous to use the 2 wings, so we are erecting them for us to recover this energy from the wind and have a better mix for today.
On top of everything else, 142 solar panels support the motors. All of them as light as possible, perfectly fitted to the surface shape and still sturdy enough so that you can walk on them. The panels absorb the sunlight from above, as well as sunlight reflected off the water. Captain Marie Jarry has been traveling the ocean for many years. He used to be on merchant ships. Today, he feels the calling of a very special mission.
A journey around the world without using any fossil fuels, but with the latest technologies. We use only renewable energy and hydrogen. Every port we stop at, we show people how it works. We show them the ship and that these solutions are available for a clean future.
But what to do if Mother Nature has a bad day? No sunlight to feed the solar panels, not even a breeze of wind, and the batteries are running low. Now engineer Hugo needs to activate the fuel cells in the energy management system, the ship's brain. The ship can continue its journey without any polluting emissions.
For me, that's the next level ship, let's say. But for me, it will start with smaller boats, and after that, it will go to passenger boats, and perhaps after that, bigger boats, so tankers.
On another positive note, it's possible that ocean wings, the sails of the catamaran, are soon to be used in larger ships. A sea change in thinking has begun. Due to high emissions issues, ports like Hamburg have started to work on methods to keep the air clean. Because heavy oil and ships' diesel pollute cities. A first solution: shore power. Ships can switch off their engines and draw energy from a power outlet. However, there are only a few ports on the planet that offer shore power, and the demand is low, since this form of power supply is still many times more expensive than just keeping the engines running. It may be true that heavy oil is already banned in many ports and coastal regions, but in the long run, the giants of the sea have to rethink their propulsion concept from square one. Cruise ships are under particularly heavy criticism. This form of vacation is very trendy right now. As a consequence, however, emissions increase as well. A first attempt at a solution: LNG, liquefied natural gas. The Coral Methane, a bunker ship, refueling one of the world's most modern cruise ships anchored here in Barcelona. It's the first of its kind that travels the 7 seas on liquefied gas. However, there's a problem. LNG is more expensive than heavy oil, and refueling is tricky. Natural gas needs to be cooled down to minus 162 degrees Celsius before it liquefies, and its volume is reduced to 1/600th. Daniel Henning and his team monitor the refueling operation on board the cruise ship.
Yeah, so in a few minutes I will close my tank number 2.
A fill-up with 900 tons of liquid natural gas gives the gigantic cruise ship enough power for 2 weeks of traveling. First, the LNG evaporates and then flows through the yellow lines to the 4 engines. The colossal 800-ton engines form 2 independent circuits. Should one fail, the other can supply the ship with electric power. In case of an emergency, the ship can switch over to ship's diesel, thus ensuring a smooth operation on board. Engines that run on LNG reduce nitric oxide emissions by up to 80% and CO2 emissions by up to 20%. And there are 0 particle or sulfur oxide emissions.
So take 2 is closed.
Yes, Chief just called. Fuel's in the bunkers. They're warming up the hose and they'll take it off.
The captain gives the command to undock. LNG is still a fossil fuel, even if it has advantages for the climate, but, and that is the hope, not for long.
LNG is a key technology because we hope that someday we'll be able to produce synthetic LNG, and that would be the next step from low emission to zero emission cruises and, of course, shipping in general.
LNG, liquefied natural gas, could be a solution for an environmentally friendly future of maritime tourism, because saying goodbye to this kind of vacation is something cruise ship aficionados are not willing to do. The ships are like swimming hotels. The biggest of them can hold more than 6,000 passengers. To cater for all of them around the clock, some ships have a crew of more than 2,000 who work behind the scenes in 24/7 shifts. First thing in the morning, while the guests are still enjoying their breakfast, the preparations for the next meals are already in high gear 2 decks below them. Be it desserts or tarts, or entire 3-course meals for every taste, the guests shall want for nothing. That's why many cruise ships have several restaurants. These are tough jobs. As it's quite common in the cruise ship business, you'll find many Asians working on board. They make significantly more money here than back home. But they are often contracted through intermediary employment agencies, and that makes it legal to pay them significantly less than the German minimum wage. Satisfying hungry cruise guests requires plenty of supplies. This is the responsibility of first purser Peter Schwichtenberg. Every day he checks the storage pantries where 1,800 articles of food are stocked.
No matter where we are, Southeast Asia, America, the Caribbean, 90% of our supplies come from Germany because of the quality and the quantity we need. The remaining 10% is everything that wouldn't last a week in a container, like fresh fruits, vegetables, and eggs. This produce is delivered by local suppliers.
The groceries must be impeccable and meet the standards of the US Health Department, the strictest anywhere in the world. But the thousands of passengers on board are not only hungry. Entertaining them and catering to their needs is a huge task. It starts with the small things. Every day, guests drop thousands of used towels into the laundry that end up on deck zero. 13 tons of laundry daily. Only a gigantic washing machine can tackle that job. The beast is what the crew calls it. 50 kilograms of laundry go through 12 wash cycles in 2 minutes. Shifts go from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. The passengers, of course, are blissfully unaware of these logistical processes. All they have to do is just enjoy their vacation at sea. Shipping. Where is it headed? The giants of the sea are getting bigger, the oceans more crowded. A rethinking is underway. Pioneers are developing new, environmentally friendly propulsion systems. Vast terminals, operating mostly autonomously. Shipping in the 21st century, a logistical and technical masterpiece.